I'm a geologist by profession, and my work frequently takes me to some pretty remote and isolated locations, places most people never get the chance to visit. Last week, I was up in the northern reaches of Alberta, Canada, conducting a survey for a potential mining site. The work itself is a bit mundane, running seismic tests, collecting rock samples and such. But what I experienced during one of these expeditions, well, it's something I can't quite shake off. I was out late trying to finish my rounds before a forecasted storm rolled in. I began to notice something peculiar, though. There was this odd clicking noise, faint at first, but becoming more distinct as time went on. It was unlike any sound I've come across in my years of field work. Then, a few hours into the night, I saw it. At first, I could just make out a pale, gaunt figure moving quickly on all fours in the distance. My headlamp only caught glimpses, but there was something chillingly human-like about its appearance. As it got closer, I could see the size of it more clearly. It stood roughly 5 feet high when upright, but it seemed to prefer moving on all fours. Its speed was incredible. One moment it was there in the beam of my light, the next it was gone, only to reappear somewhere else entirely. I was taken aback by its face. It had large, pitch-black eyes, much bigger than any human's eyes, and an open, gaping mouth, but no discernible nose. The clicking noises I heard earlier, they were coming from this thing. Seeing that creature, it was like a punch to the gut, The fear, the adrenaline, everything was so intense. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all, but it's like every natural instinct in me was screaming danger. The creature didn't seem to notice me at first, or at least it didn't show any signs of aggression. I was trying to stay as quiet as possible, hoping that it would just move on. The smell around me became heavy, almost metallic, like the scent of iron or fresh blood. That's when I realized the creature was moving in a pattern, like it was searching for something. Suddenly, it turned its head directly towards me. It's hard to describe the terror I felt. It wasn't just a physical presence, but a crushing wave of dread that overwhelmed me. My heart pounded in my chest as the creature moved closer, the clicking noise getting louder and more rapid. The standoff didn't last long, though. It was only a matter of seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Then, out of nowhere, a loud crack of thunder rolled in, followed by the first drops of rain. The creature immediately recoiled and retreated, moving at an incredible speed until it was nothing more than a distant figure in the darkness. After that, I quickly packed up my gear and headed back to camp. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every sound, every rustle in the bushes kept me on high alert. I was out of there at the first light of dawn, and I've not been back since. I still don't know what it was I encountered that night, but it was something I'm not eager to cross paths with again. I'd love to hear what you and your listeners think about this. I work at this summer home community in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina. Best I can describe it is that it's like a nice neighborhood that's kind of like a resort with a swimming pool, golf, hiking trails, spa, and clubhouse. It's the opposite of a snowbird community because it's completely inaccessible in the winter due to the snow in the mountains. I work there during the summer when all the residents are around, but I'm the only one who also stays through the winter, basically making sure the place isn't ransacked when no one else is there. I live in a small house, and I don't do much except wander around in my pickup with the snowplow attachment, just making my presence known. I bring up supplies for the whole winter and just stay from October until early April or so, alone. It's not as bad as it sounds since the satellite TV and internet work pretty well. I can communicate with the outside world, I just can't really get any goods I need during those months, so I have to plan in advance. I have a big chest freezer, but I also eat a lot of canned food. I do what I can, but the food does get a bit boring. My first winter up there was really quiet. Nothing much happened. I watched a lot of TV and ate a lot of chili and chips. This past winter, though, something odd happened. I usually try to walk around the neighborhood at least once a day, not just because of my job, but also just to get out. I would go nuts in the house all day. Unless it's a snowstorm, of course. One of the first days I was there, I went out. It hadn't snowed yet since it was just October, but everyone was gone since you really never know when snow might come. They go ahead and close the community just in case. I still had a few winterizing things to do, like check on the pool's foundation. I headed down to the pool to do that, walking just for the exercise. I started looking around the pool when I heard this strange noise coming from the nearby woods. The community itself is all groomed and landscaped, but the woods really isn't that far away. It is the mountains after all. So a few yards behind the grassy area next to the pool was forest, basically. The noise was like nothing I'd ever heard. Something between a yell and a yodel. Not really scary, but strange. I just watched the woods to see if I could get a look at whatever it was, but I didn't see anything, just heard that odd sound. A few weeks later, the first snow came. I stayed inside because I couldn't afford to get lost, being on my own and everything. The next day it was sunny, and I decided to first head out and plow the roads around the neighborhood. I'd learned by trial and error that if I let the plowing go too long, it'd be almost impossible to do it when it snowed again. Snow gets deep and packed in then, which wouldn't be a big deal since no one else was up there, but I couldn't really do my job if I couldn't go around checking on everything. I started up the truck in late morning and started driving around, plowing the few roads that snake around the 100 or so homes in the community. While I was plowing, I saw some tracks in the snow off the road. I'd seen tracks from coyotes, deer, and even bear, but these tracks were bigger. I couldn't see what they were, though, and I didn't bother to get out of the truck to get a look. I didn't think much more about the tracks until one evening when I was walking on the newly plowed road. It was just beginning to get dark, and I thought I should head back. As I turned around, I glanced toward the woods and saw something walking just outside the trees. At first, I thought it was a person, and I was scared. There wasn't supposed to be anyone out here. There wasn't any reason for anyone to be here, and if they were here, they had to have hiked or come in by helicopter. You can't use those mountain roads in winter, which is exactly why we closed the neighborhood. As I stared at it, though, I could see it was too big and hairy to be a person. It was covered with hair or fur or something. But it wasn't an ape because it walked upright. Also, it was pretty far away, but I thought it was taller than a person, maybe 8 or 9 feet. I remembered the tracks then and wished I'd taken a picture of them. I was scared, but then I started to think that it must have been around for a while, and it hadn't hurt me, so why would it now? A few days later, I saw some tracks outside my house. This time, I did take a look at them and saw they looked like bare human feet. Only really big, like size 25 shoes maybe, I don't know. Right on my doorstep was a dead fish. At first I was scared. Did this thing come right up to my house and leave me a dead fish? But then I started to think maybe it was a gift, because it was fresh. And that creature must have gone to some trouble to get it since the lakes and streams were iced over. I took it inside and cooked it, and it was the best thing I'd eaten since fall. A few days later, it brought me a rabbit. That was a little gross, but what the heck, I found a video online on how to clean it and ate that too. It kept bringing me things all winter. Not every day, but every few days. And weirdly, I felt less alone. Once spring came, I didn't see any evidence of it anymore. It felt kind of lonely thinking it was gone, but I bet it'll be back this winter. My old house used to sit in a nice rural area in Ohio. It was a really nice, tranquil area surrounded by trees, nature, and wildlife. It was about 100 miles away from Loveland, if you know where that is. It was definitely a small town vibe. Everybody knew each other's name and secrets were hard to keep. There was a local reservoir that I would frequently catch catfish in. It was a really cool place, and since there wasn't much else for a young boy to do in my town, I pretty much spent every single day fishing at the reservoir. Life was simple back then, but things changed when I saw something I would never forget in that reservoir. I was spending the evening with my friends, Kyle and Lenny, exploring the nooks and corners of our hometown. Eventually, of course, we all decided to head to the reservoir. We'd made our way to the swampy shores hoping to catch a catfish or two, but what we found was not a catfish. It was something different. As we edged closer to the water, a creepy figure emerged from the dark, rippling surface. It was taller than any of us, reaching almost 7 feet. It had an unusual humanoid appearance, but with no arms in sight. A sight so surreal it seemed like it was pulled from a science fiction movie. In our shock, we tried to make sense of what we saw. Green, glowing eyes gleamed ominously in the murky darkness, and its feet, webbed and large, made a squishing sound as it tread on the swampy ground. Was it an escaped experiment? A cruel joke someone was playing on us? Or was it something we couldn't explain at all? Frozen in fear, we could only stare as the creature moved toward us. Lenny, the bravest amongst us, stood his ground, not taking his eyes off the luminescent green orbs that stared right back at us. The creature stopped momentarily, as if studying us, before moving again. This time its direction was clear. It was moving towards Lenny. "Lenny, move!" I remember yelling, but it was as if he was under some sort of trance. He just stood there, captivated by the creature's glowing eyes. Before any of us could react, the creature was inches away from Lenny. The eerie silence was broken by a soft, squelching sound as the creature extended what could have been its mouth. In a moment of sheer panic, Kyle and I lunged forward, grabbing Lenny by his arms and pulling him away. We didn't stick around to see what the creature did next. Adrenaline pumping, we ran as fast as we could, leaving behind the chilling, squelching sounds and the glow of green eyes. That night, none of us could sleep. We were haunted by what we'd seen, by the creature that had almost gotten Lenny. It was clear to us that what we encountered was no ordinary creature. The next day, we returned to the reservoir reluctantly. We wanted answers. We found large, webbed footprints, exactly where we'd seen the creature emerge from the water, a chilling reminder of our encounter. We quickly decided to report this to the local police. I'll never forget the skeptical look on the sheriff's face as we narrated our experience. He humored us, visiting the reservoir to investigate. But his skepticism faded when he saw the footprints. Even he couldn't dismiss the tangible evidence right in front of him. Though we continued to fish at the reservoir, things were never the same. Every ripple in the water would send shivers down our spines. We'd laugh it off, joking about the lake monster, but the humor was tinged with a sense of underlying fear. As for Lenny, he's never been quite the same. He's quieter, more reserved. He was no longer the bravest amongst us, and there was a wariness in his eyes, a caution that wasn't there before. We never talk about that night. It became a silent pact between us. But the memory remains, etched into our minds, a chilling reminder of the day the Charles Mill Lake monster almost got Lenny. Life has a strange way of unfolding. I left my small town and my friends behind, seeking a fresh start in the big city. I exchanged the reservoir's gentle lapping waves for honking taxis and towering skyscrapers. I left believing I was escaping the ghost of that horrid monster, but it was a memory that trailed me like a shadow. Years turned into decades, and our terrifying encounter at the reservoir became a distant memory. I lost touch with Kyle and Lenny, our paths diverging in the complicated maze of life. But I often found myself wondering how they were, if they too were haunted by those luminescent green eyes. One cold winter night, I found myself back at the reservoir. It was not a planned visit, but a spontaneous drive that led me there. Everything was just as I remembered. The cool breeze, the eerie silence, and the dark water surface. As I stood on the edge of the reservoir, staring into its dark depths, I realized that the encounter with the monster had left a deeper mark on me than I initially thought. It wasn't just a memory of fear. It was a lesson, a harsh one, that humbled me and shaped me into the person I had become. The universe is vast and filled with mysteries we cannot comprehend. Our understanding of the world is like a grain of sand in a vast desert. My encounter with the creature was a reminder of our insignificance and the infinite mysteries that our universe holds. I've learned to respect these mysteries and live with the realization that we do not control the world. Instead, we are merely temporary inhabitants. There's so much more out there than our minds can fathom. And now, as I live my life in the bustling city, far from the quiet tranquility of my hometown, I carry this lesson with me. Every honk of a taxi, every rush of the crowd is a reminder of the vast, mysterious world beyond our understanding. Even today, the thought of that strange, horrid creature sends chills down my spine. But it's a chilling reminder that I'm grateful for. It's made me realize that we're a part of a world much larger than ourselves, a world filled with unimaginable wonders and terrifying creatures, a world that, in its unfathomable depth, holds more mysteries than we could possibly imagine. That monster is a part of that mystery, a part of my story, a part of who I am. This happened over 20 years ago in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. It was a pretty long time ago, so I might be a little fuzzy on some of the details. When I was around 10 or 11 years old, I didn't really have all that many friends, so I would spend a lot of time at my cousin's house, who was a few years older than me. Despite the age gap, my cousin and I were close, and his mom treated me like another son. Plus, he had video games and a flat-screen TV in his basement. I would sleep over a lot. Sometimes in the summer, I would spend the whole weekend. Usually, it was just me and him doing dumb stuff or playing video games, but sometimes his friends from around the neighborhood would come hang out and we would all crash in the basement. I kind of idolized these kids. They were all older than me, but still treated me like I was one of their friends. They would joke around all the time and come up with crazy things to do. Nothing dangerous, but stuff like egging houses or prank calls. I loved hanging out with them. This one time when a bunch of his friends came over, they all planned to spend the night. I'm not sure how it even came up, but we all decided to pull an all-nighter. Somehow it seemed like a great idea. So that's what we did. We ordered pizza at 10 p.m. and took turns playing Mario Kart for hours, until like 2 a.m. Two of the kids eventually fell asleep, and naturally we drew all over their faces, and dipped their hands in cups of water to see if they would pee themselves. Typical early 2000s teenage stuff. I was exhausted, but after seeing all that happening, I recommitted myself to staying up all night. And I did. Around 5 a.m., everybody was awake at this point. The other two kids woke up after the vandalism. We all decided to take blankets out onto the front yard and hang out. It was summer, so it was warm, and my cousin lived in a nicer neighborhood. The thought of something potentially bad happening never even crossed our minds. So, there we all were, hanging out on the front yard with our blankets, laying in the grass and just shooting the breeze. After a little while, the sun was just starting to peek out, and the guys were dropping off to sleep one by one. It was just me and my cousin talking for a little while, but eventually he surrendered to sleep too. Not only did I make it, but I was now the last one. I was exhausted at this point, but for some reason just couldn't fall asleep. I was staring up at the rising sun when I saw something moving out of the corner of my eye. I turned my head to face it and was very confused about what I saw. It looked like a short little fuzzy bear walking on two legs. It had this weird kind of thick-looking white fur. I didn't see any eyes, so I couldn't tell if it was looking at me. It just stood in the middle of the road, I guess facing my direction. I figured I was like hallucinating or something, so I rubbed my eyes, but when I opened them, it was still there. I didn't know what it was, and really didn't think anything that small could be dangerous. So I uncovered myself, stood up, and took a few steps towards it. As soon as I started walking its way, it did a sort of shuffle away from me. No turning its body around or anything, it just moved. I stopped and it stopped. I started walking towards it again, and it shuffled away, so I just kept on walking after it. It was a summer Saturday morning, so nobody was out and about. No cars or pedestrians on the road, just me and this little fur ball. It just kept walking up the road, and I just kept on following. After a few minutes, the thing cut off the road and into a thick patch of trees and kept going. I stood on the road and watched its weird little body move into the woods, walk about 100 feet in and just stop in some kind of little clearing. Too curious at this point, I followed in without hesitation. I walked maybe halfway towards the clearing when I stopped. I just remember feeling afraid, like really scared. I didn't know what, but it felt like I was doing something wrong or that I shouldn't be here. The thing just kept staring at me. I also noticed a kind of awful smell. It reminded me of the time when our refrigerator shorted out while we were away on vacation, and we came home to the smell of rancid meat throughout the house. I backed up a few paces, and when I did that, the thing shuffled towards me. I turned my back on it and started walking a little faster. I looked over my shoulder and it wasn't doing a shuffling anymore. It was running full speed towards me. I bolted right out of there. When I got back to the road, I kept running. I looked over my shoulder and the thing was just gone. Vanished. I ran a few hundred yards back to Cousin's house and I shook him awake and told him I wanted to go inside. Thankfully, he didn't ask any questions. He probably just figured I was tired and wanted to sleep on the couch. We woke the rest of the guys up and went into the basement. It took a while, but eventually I was able to fall back asleep until my dad came to get me later that afternoon. I never told anyone this story until now, and despite going to my cousin's house a bunch more times, I never saw the thing again, though I always stayed away from that little patch of woods. I forgot all about this incident over the years and only just remembered when I found your channel. I had eventually just chalked it up to being overtired, but after seeing so many other stories like mine, I don't really know. My strange encounter happened about a year ago. I know this story is not one of your typical encounters, but it happened. I have seriously been shaken ever since. I work at a national park in Kentucky. It is called Mammoth Cave. Mammoth Cave is a massive cave system currently known as the most extensive cave system in the world. It has over 420 miles of explored tunnels. It is still expanding. The portion outside of the cave is a large park as well. It is a great place to take a family on vacation. Families can hike, kayak, and explore the cave. However, as I say this, I also preface with being cautious of your time inside the cave. I have worked at many parks throughout my career. I have a niche in war history, specifically weaponry. Mammoth Cave was an exciting placement for me. The bats that live in the cave produce guano, bat poop, a key component in potassium nitrate, better known as saltpeter, used during earlier wars. Enslaved people were forced to mine it. Several artifacts from that period have been recovered from the cave. I am not one to typically believe in wild tales, but after my encounter, I discovered your channel hoping to make sense of what I saw. Honestly, though, it has led me to believe that many things in our big world are unexplainable. Anyhow, I digress. Part of working the caves means giving tours. Tours become monotonous quickly. Tourists are always asking the same questions and giving out the same answers over and over. Rinse and repeat. I always try to be engaging to elicit good tips. It was a Tuesday and the second tour I had given that morning. I had a relatively large group of people. Part of the group was a family of 3, mom, dad, and a girl about the age of 10. The family was relatively quiet but seemed engaged throughout the tour. Of course, the cave comes with its legends. Some of these are spirits that haunt the cave, but I never gave this much thought. I never even considered that there was such a thing as a ghost. I always felt that ghosts were a bunch of hoopla created by simple-minded people. I would, of course, tell the stories in the hope of engaging my audience, but I had never seen anything to make me believe that there was any truth to it. As I led my group to the haunted chamber, I noticed the temperature had changed. The temperature change seemed odd because the cave keeps a consistent 54 degrees once inside and away from the entrance. Over my time working within the cave system, I had become accustomed to the temperature. I remember thinking that perhaps I was getting sick. As I began speaking to the group, the internal light system glitched. The lights were not going off, but they were dimming. The lights dimming was unusual. During this, I glanced at the family standing before me to the right. The daughter suddenly pitched forward like someone had shoved her from behind. Her dad's quick reflexes saved her from a fall. I asked if she was okay, and she said someone had pushed her. The strange thing was her family was to the side, and no one was behind them. I checked that she was okay and had my partner continue with the group while I attended to this family. As I leaned down in front of the girl, rocks started shuffling behind her. Small stones about the size of driveway gravel began rolling. The ground was unlevel in this chamber section, but not enough for the previously undisturbed stones to move. I told the family we should catch up with the group and leave now. As we exited the chamber, I saw someone's back as they rounded a rock outcropping. Thinking that this was another tour member trying to be funny. By being disruptive within a historic site, I quickly returned to the area to confront the hoodlum. Guess what, Mark? Nothing. No one was there. The entire room was empty except for me. There was nowhere someone could have hidden or gone to escape. I am nervous, anxious, and a little sick at this point. I quickly caught up to the group, and luckily we were at the end of the tour. I took the rest of the day off and debated returning to work the next day. I am unsure if it was the girl, the time we were there, or me. I have no idea, but there is truly something supernatural inside Mammoth Cave.